For nearly 300 years, one family ruled Egypt without ever truly becoming Egyptian. They spoke Greek. They married their own siblings. They gave their children Greek names. And then came the last of them. The one who actually learned the language of the people she ruled, the one who would fight harder than any of her ancestors to keep Egypt free. She would fail, but the way she failed would make her famous for 2,000 years. Her name was Cleopatra VII. Born in Alexandria in 69 BC, into the Ptolemaic dynasty that had ruled Egypt since the time of Alexander the Great. She was educated at the Great Library of Alexandria, one of the finest centers of learning in the ancient world. She studied philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. She was already remarkable before she ever sat on a throne. What set her apart from every ruler in her family's 300-year history was something simple. She learned Egyptian. Not just learned it, she mastered it, along with at least 7 other languages including Latin, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Ethiopian. For the first time in centuries, the ruler of Egypt could speak directly to her own people without an interpreter. When her father died in 51 BC, Cleopatra was 18 years old. She inherited the throne alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, who was only 10. As was the custom of her dynasty, they were declared co-rulers and married. It was a political arrangement, not a personal one. Cleopatra had no intention of sharing power for long. Her brother's advisors had other ideas. They saw a young boy they could control, and a capable older sister who threatened that control. Within a few years, they had pushed Cleopatra out. She was forced to flee Egypt entirely. She went to Syria, and she immediately began raising an army. She was 21 years old, in a foreign country, with no throne and no army of her own yet. Most people in that situation would negotiate, wait, or give up. Cleopatra started recruiting soldiers. At exactly this moment, Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt, chasing his defeated rival Pompey. He found Pompey already dead, killed by Ptolemy's advisors who wanted to impress Rome's most powerful man. Caesar was not impressed. He was angry. And suddenly both siblings needed Caesar on their side. Cleopatra's brother controlled the palace and the city. She couldn't walk in through the front door. Ancient sources record that she found a way to be smuggled inside, brought directly to Caesar in a private meeting before her brother's advisors could stop it. What exactly she said to him that night, nobody recorded. What is certain is that she left that meeting with his support. Caesar was 52. Cleopatra was 21. The relationship that developed between them was real, but it was also deeply political on both sides. Caesar needed Egypt's enormous wealth to fund his ambitions in Rome. Cleopatra needed Roman military protection to take back her throne. They needed each other. The standoff turned violent. Ptolemy's forces besieged Caesar and Cleopatra in the palace. Fighting broke out across Alexandria. During the chaos, fire spread to the harbor and damaged parts of the Great Library of Alexandria, one of the greatest losses of knowledge in ancient history. When Roman reinforcements arrived and broke the siege, Ptolemy XIII fled and drowned in the Nile. Cleopatra was restored to the throne. She was 22 years old. She and Caesar had a son whom she named Caesarion, Little Caesar. Caesar never formally acknowledged the child in Rome. He already had political enemies there who feared his growing power. But in Egypt, Cleopatra presented the boy as her co-ruler, reinforcing her dynasty's connection to the most powerful man in the world. In 44 BC, Caesar was assassinated in Rome, 23 stab wounds. Cleopatra had been living in Rome as his guest. She had watched how Roman politics worked up close. She returned to Egypt immediately. The most powerful protector she had was gone. She needed a new strategy. Rome plunged into civil war again. Three men fought to fill Caesar's place: Octavian, Caesar's young grandnephew and heir; Mark Antony, Caesar's most trusted general; and Lepidus, a politician with less staying power than either. Cleopatra watched carefully. One of these men would eventually win. She needed to be on the right side before that happened. Mark Antony summoned Cleopatra to the city of Tarsus to answer questions about her loyalties. She did not arrive as a subject answering a summons. She arrived on a golden barge, dressed as the goddess Isis, surrounded by attendants dressed as sea nymphs. The entire city turned out to watch. Antony was left waiting at his own welcoming banquet, sitting alone because everyone had gone to the river to see her arrive. What developed between Antony and Cleopatra was again both personal and political. He was charming, powerful, and impulsive. She was calculating, multilingual, and deeply strategic. Together they controlled enormous resources. Antony had Rome's military power. Cleopatra had Egypt's wealth. But Octavian was younger, colder, and far more patient than either of them. He launched a propaganda campaign in Rome, portraying Antony as a man who had abandoned Rome for a foreign queen, a man who had lost his Roman identity to an Egyptian seductress. It was largely false, but it worked. In 31 BC, the two sides met in a decisive naval battle off the coast of Greece at Actium. Antony and Cleopatra's combined fleet was formidable, but the battle went wrong almost immediately. Cleopatra's ships withdrew early. Whether this was a planned retreat, a misread signal, or a collapse of nerve, historians still debate. Antony followed her. The withdrawal became a rout. Octavian's forces pursued them back to Egypt. For the first time in her adult life, Cleopatra had no good options left. She retreated to her mausoleum with her treasury and the most valuable treasures of Egypt. She sent word to Octavian she was willing to negotiate if her children could inherit Egypt. Octavian kept her talking. He needed her alive for his triumph in Rome, a public procession where defeated enemies were displayed as trophies. He had no intention of negotiating. Antony received a false report that Cleopatra had already died. Whether she sent it deliberately or it was a miscommunication, nobody knows for certain. He fell on his own sword. When news reached Cleopatra that he was still alive, she had him brought to her. He died in her arms. Octavian's soldiers broke into the mausoleum before Cleopatra could take her own life. She was taken captive. Octavian visited her personally. He was polite. He was also unmovable. She would be taken to Rome. She would walk in chains through his triumph. On August 10th, 30 BC, Cleopatra was found dead in her chamber. She was 39 years old. Ancient sources describe a snake, specifically an asp, a symbol of royalty in Egypt, though the exact method of her death remains uncertain even today. Some historians believe it may have been poison. What is certain is that she chose how her story ended, rather than let Octavian write that ending for her. With Cleopatra dead, Octavian executed Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, the only remaining threat to his power. Egypt became a Roman province. The Ptolemaic dynasty that had ruled for nearly 3 centuries was finished. For 22 years, she had kept Egypt independent by being sharper, more adaptable, and more determined than anyone who came against her. She spoke the languages. She read the texts. She understood the gods of her people well enough to become one of them in their eyes. In the end, Rome was simply too large and too powerful for any single ruler to hold back indefinitely. But she held it back longer than anyone else could have. And she made sure the world would remember her name long after the empire that defeated her had turned to dust.